Worrying news today. Labor leader Anthony Albanese, federal Labor leader, today linked our national security alliance with the United States, the most critical security alliance we have, to global warming policy. He said he knows of the risk that climate bears on our security, which to me is pure alarmism. It does. I haven't seen it. But he says that if he becomes Prime Minister, and odds are that he will make comprehensive US-Australia cooperation on climate change a hallmark of our alliance. Now, how this will work out in practice, I don't know. We'll see, I guess. But there's a real danger here of making our defence alliance in some way conditional on policies to supposedly stop global warming, which would be nuts. I mean, dangerous. And this is just more good news for China. They're a real threat, America's biggest threat right now. Because it is becoming clearer that whether you think global warming is a threat or whether, like me, you think it's a wildly exaggerated scare, one thing is clear. This global warming scare is being exploited by China to make the West weaker and this dictatorship stronger. Because we in the West are cutting our emissions, which costs us money, costs us jobs. We're getting rid of our coal-fired power stations and our power prices are going up because green energy isn't cheap. China, though, is not cutting emissions. It's actually increasing them. It is now emitting more global warming gases than the developed world put together, including the US. And two important things are happening here. One, China is actually building more and more coal-fired power stations, more than we're knocking down. It wants cheap power, you see. And the other thing is this, Western companies whose factories do need cheap power are moving their factories to China. And that is one reason why Europe's emissions from industrial processes is falling by 40% over the past 30 years. But China's, well, they've gone up by 2/3, and that's just in 20 years. And that's in part because this business is being shifted from Europe to China. So we're industrializing because of global warming. China is industrializing, getting very strong. New US President Joe Biden, well, this is like Anthony Albanese. Global warming is a big threat, worse than the Taliban. And he says it's a national security threat. And it is, but not in the way he means. Not in the way, it actually is a security threat in the way I mean, China getting stronger. Now, Biden gets this in a dim way, and last week sent his climate envoy, John Kerry, over to China to ask him very nicely, please promise to cut your emissions just a bit before this big Glasgow climate summit in November. And China gave John Kerry the bum's rush. China's foreign minister has been perfectly happy a couple of weeks ago to meet the Taliban leader, who's now the president, but he wouldn't meet John Kerry, not one-on-one. He said, let's talk via video, even though Kerry had actually flown into the country with his list of demands. And it went downhill from there. Kerry asking, could China please cut its emissions? No. Could China at least please stop funding new coal-fired power stations? No. China told him, we're going to do this thing our way, because it's got the US just where it wants with global warming, getting weaker, China getting stronger. Joining me is Alan Moran of Regulation Economics, which studies the economics of global warming policies. Alan Moran, it's great to see you again. Look, first of all, Labor's plan to somehow, in a way that Anthony Albanese didn't spell out, link global warming policies to our security alliance with the US. What did you make of that?
Well, it's crazy, really. The whole thing has been energized by the IPCC's recent report, which UN Secretary General Guterres called a code red for humanity. But when you actually read the report, it was rather more timid and certainly less alarmist than previous reports. What we've actually seen, though, that these reports have provided this rationale for all the various measures we've taken on hydrocarbons to ban them. China has also increased its levels of renewables, solar and wind. It's about 10% in China. It's a bit more than that in the US. We've got over 20%, Europe even more. But the interesting thing about China is that last month, China announced that it will cease all subsidies to these renewables. And as you know, as you mentioned, China's certainly in subsidizing the renewables, hasn't let go of its coal. There's about 70% of the world's coal plants in the recent decade have been in China. So China's certainly has been subsidizing renewables, not to the same degree as we have in the West, but it has ceased doing so, and it's certainly not let go of the cheap power which we've put in place. The odd thing is, the disastrous thing from our point of view, is that Biden's going in the opposite direction. His major build better, build newer, better, and all that sort of slogans thing is basically to replace coal and gas power by the renewables. He's talking about 37% renewables by the mid-2030s. That's basically crazy. We know where that goes.
This is my point. Well, I know. And then there was stopping the development of pipelines and all this kind of thing, bringing in gas. But this is my point. Global warming policies are making China stronger, the West weaker. True or false?
Exactly. I mean, more than half the world's steel is in China now. Same sort of numbers for aluminium. Virtually all processes have been outsourced to China, which is why China is now the major emitter of carbon dioxide, and the EU is basically totally deindustrialized. So we're if you like, we've been hitching our wagon to the United States for the last 70 years or more, and now we're hitching it to the United States, which is deliberately disarming economically, and which of course is facing military dungeon as a result of its Afghanistan retreat anyway. So we're in a somewhat powerless position, and certainly we do not want to make it even worse by further reducing our own ability to produce goods and services and supply the area and our living standards by taking out.
You make a very good point. You make a very good point, because when we deindustrialize, we also lose our capability of supplying our own needs in times of trouble. If we don't have a heavy industry, then how can we produce the armaments in times of war, for instance? I know remote possibility, but if you don't plan for that remote possibility, you are cactus when it happens. Alan Moran, thank you so much indeed for your time.
You're welcome.